Air Canada and the union representing its flight attendants have reached a tentative deal to end the strike. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says the deal will soon be presented to its membership. There haven't been many details on the agreement yet, but the union did say the contract puts an end to unpaid labour by flight attendants.
We're so happy that our flight attendants are going to get the industry-leading contract for Canadian flight attendants that they deserve. And we're incredibly happy that they're going to get the chance to have their vote heard and vote on the agreement. We're going to get the planes back in the sky. We're going to get our customers moving. And as a management team, if I may say, we know that we need to rebuild the trust and confidence of our customers and our 10,000 flight attendants.
Air Canada says flights will gradually return beginning this evening, while CUPE has advised its members to fully cooperate with resuming operations. The airline says it could still take 7 to 10 days to return to full regular service. Here to talk about the resolution of that strike is Siobhán Vipond. She's the Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
What is your reaction to the news of a tentative deal? How significant is that?
It's significant. It's also good news. This is the purpose of negotiations. This is what unions are pushing for. Workers said what needed to happen, and they did it at the table as they should have been. And that's the win that we're seeing today.
Yeah. So when you say they did at the table, it's it wasn't because of arbitration in terms of binding arbitration. But CUPE did say today that, as I mentioned, unpaid labour is over for flight attendants, even though we don't have details of that. And Air Canada is saying that to CBC News today that it's an industry-leading deal on the table in terms of the ground work compensation. I don't know whether you know anything about the details of the deal. Can you tell us anything that you might have heard, or what might we expect to see in the deal that will be taken to members for ratification?
Yeah, I mean, the big one is and what we've been hearing about is that unpaid work won't fly, right? And so that's what's happened, is they are happy with the tentative deal and I think bringing it to the members because it does undo what I think most people are appalled for, right? It was what do you mean you're not getting paid? What do you mean we have to move? And especially in these days of planes sitting in tarmacs for a long time or sitting at the gate for a long time, it's and you're not getting paid. That is the most basic of what needs to happen. So we know that they've thrown that on the head and they feel proud that they have gotten to a negotiated deal that they'll be able to present to their members. And so once we see what once the members have their say, then we will know exactly what those details are. But I think it is a good day when, unions, their members come together, they push back to make sure that they're getting a deal that's good for the job and good for them.
Okay, so it was 9 months of talks, many of those months stalled talks, 9 hours overnight into the wee hours. I know you weren't in the room, or I don't think you were in the room, no. We did see a statement from the Canadian Labour Congress earlier today saying essentially that you believe that what the pivotal catalyst was the CUPE being willing to defy the back-to-work order. Why do you feel that was the impetus for actually getting a deal?
Well, introducing 107 was an overstep by Carney and the government because they were interfering in the process of negotiations. So once that happened, they needed to back away because the idea of going on strike is to put pressure on. But we heard from the CEO of Air Canada, they felt no pressure because they were just going to make a phone call and get 107, and then they thought then it's just going to be done. So their goal wasn't actually to negotiate a deal. But then once those workers stood up and said, actually, no, we are going to take our right to strike, we're going to do it, and we're going to take our labor away, which is the power of workers, then guess what ends up happening is you have to go to the table, you have to find a solution, and the solution is a deal. So yeah, pressure, it happened, but that is the power of the negotiating table. And whenever government oversteps by introducing 107 like this, it is interfering with that process and the balance of power.
Now, last night on the show, Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu certainly didn't characterize it as an overstep or even a misstep. She defended it by saying that it was clear that Air Canada and CUPE needed another tool to finish the negotiations because both sides had declared an impasse. How do you react to that?
Well, I mean, I think the timeline, as you pointed out, which is like, there was months of it not happening. Then like last Friday, as we're so far behind, it's impossible to happen. Then they sit at the table and are able to get it in one night. That is showing that if they had been allowed to do the process of what, negotiations look like, which is, the passing of ideas, sitting at the table. But introducing 107 meant actually we're going to take away what that process is and making that the employer didn't actually have to go to that table meaningfully bargaining because they had this, the government's just going to help us get through this without actually negotiating. Because, decisions have to be made at that table. It's about going back and forward. It's about what's going to work, what makes sense. And the union goes in making sure to get a good deal for those workers. They were able to do it. And I would say the timeline shows you that if they had let it step aside, maybe that we wouldn't be having this conversation about after 3 days of people being stranded and Air Canada having no plan on getting them home. Maybe we'd be having a conversation, about this is what it looks like when people negotiate and get a deal that's good for everyone.
From a union perspective, I'm wondering whether you think there'll be any impact politically for this government because of its very quick invoking of Section 107, especially in terms of support from unionized workers or from Canadian workers. Will they pay any kind of price for having done that and then clearly last night not saying it was a misstep?
Well, listen, this is not what Canadians voted for. I don't think we definitely union members were not voting for someone who was going to interfere in the constitutional right to, free collective bargaining. And that's what happened in this process. So
does the announcement of the probe into unpaid work that the minister made last night make any difference? Does that mitigate things? Or
I mean, sure, have a probe, but why didn't you have it 9 months ago when they started and it was very clear that this was actually an issue? So we're having it now at a pressure point. What we need to see now is actually that 107 is struck from the labor code, because what we have to have is that we have to have laws and rules that mean that government is not overstepping and interfering in the process. That is what comes from labor peace, which is a good relationship between an employer and a union. And that happens when they're able to be at the table and find an agreement, get a deal, and do what's good, and hopefully do that without labor disruption. That's not what happened. It was an introducing of this, you took away that, and then it's like, oh, unpaid, CUPE has had a great campaign, unpaid work, won't fly, for a year. We, can talk to people on planes and they've heard about it, and suddenly the government learned yesterday that unpaid work was a problem. It's going to be an issue. We need to see a government that is not going to hold up, CEOs and, profitable businesses on the backs of workers. We need them to stand up and step up and, show up for workers.
So you want Section 107 gone. Yes. I know it's also being taken to court by the unions, but you would like the government to get rid of it before it even has to go through the whole court system, is what you're saying.
Ure, like we've seen in the last...
is there fear that they will invoke it again?
Well, they've invoked it so many times in the last year, right? We saw it...
I was going to ask about that in terms of the pushback this time. What do you think is the difference in terms of the pushback compared to the previous times, whether we're talking rail workers or Canada Post? Yeah. Why was this the moment of defiance and also all the unions saying, whoa, that's enough? Why this moment?
Well, I mean, we're democratic organizations, and this time the workers were like, we are not going to go back. They made that decision. The union was backing them. They had the ability. That's why it is this moment. But it's also the first time, the second time. I think people are doing what's best for their members to get a deal. That's what they're going to show up and do every time. And the labor movement is united behind this, right? Like, we've had an emergency meeting. Everybody's on that call. Everybody is there. Everybody's showing up because we know that the right to strike is fundamental to the balance of power that needs to happen when you have a union. This totally undermined that, and I think it really showed how bad, because it wasn't introduced after there was an impasse. It was introduced within hours, assuming that they're trusting one side, but not listening to the other side about, actually, we're going to get a deal.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.